This is how we did things back in my day. And now I have shown thee, my son Methuselah, every sight which I saw prior to thy birth. I will relate another vision which I saw before I was married. They resemble each other. The first was when I was learning a book, the other before I was married to thy mother. I saw a potent vision, and on account of these things besought the Lord. I was lying down in the house of my grandfather Malalel, when I saw in a vision heaven purifying and snatched away, and falling to the earth. I saw likewise the earth absorbed by a great abyss, and mountains suspended over mountains. Hills were sinking upon hills. Lofty trees were gliding off from their trunks, and were in the act of being projected and of sinking into the abyss. Being alarmed at these things, my voice faltered. I cried out and said, "The earth is destroyed." Then my grandfather Malalel raised me up and said to me, Why dost thou thus cry out, my son, and wherefore dost thou lament? Right? Enoch's learning how to be a man from his grandfather Malalel. Right? I related to him the whole vision which I had seen. He said to me, Confirmed is that which thou hast seen, my son, and potent the vision of thy dreams respecting every secret sin of the earth. Its substance shall sink into the abyss, and a great destruction take place. Now, my son, rise up and beseech the Lord of glory, for thou art faithful, that a remnant may be left upon earth, and that he would not wholly destroy it. My son, all this calamity upon earth comes down from heaven, and upon earth shall there be a great destruction. Then I arose, prayed and entreated, and wrote down my prayer for the generations of the world, explaining everything to my son Methuselah. When I went out below, and looking up to heaven, beheld the sun proceeding from the east, the moon descending to the west, a few scattered stars, and everything which God has known from the beginning, I blessed the Lord of judgment and magnified him, because he hath sent forth the sun from the chambers of the sea, that ascending and rising in the face of heaven it might spring up and pursue the path which has been pointed out to it. I lifted up my hands in righteousness and blessed the Holy and the Great One. I spoke out with the breath of my mouth and with the tongue of flesh which God has formed for all the sons of mortal men, that with it they may speak, giving them breath, a mouth, and a tongue to converse with. Blessed art thou, O Lord the King, great and powerful in thy greatness, Lord of all the creatures of heaven, King of kings, God of the whole world, whose reign, whose kingdom, and whose majesty endures for ever and ever. From generation to generation shall thy dominion exist. All the heavens are thy throne for ever, and all thy earth thy footstool for ever and for ever. For thou hast made them, and over all thou reignest. No act whatsoever exceeds thy power. With thee wisdom is unchangeable. Right? So with thee wisdom is unchangeable. So let's say you decide to do something and somebody comes up to you and they don't want you to do that, they want you to do something else, so they start nagging you. Right? So with thee wisdom is unchangeable. Right? He makes a decision and that's what he's going to do. Maybe not. I don't know. What do you think? Nor from thy throne and from thy presence is it ever averted. Thou knowest all things, seest and hearest them. Nor is anything concealed from thee. For thou perceivest all things. The angels of thy heavens have transgressed, and on mortal flesh shall thy wrath remain until the day of the great judgment. Now then, O God, Lord of and mighty King, I entreat thee and beseech thee to grant my prayer, that a posterity may be left to me on earth, that the whole human race may not perish, that the earth may not be left destitute and destruction take place forever. O my Lord, let the race perish from off the earth which has offended thee, but a righteous and upright race established for a posterity forever. Hide not thy face, O Lord, from the prayer of thy servant. After this I saw another dream, and explained it all to thee, my son. Enoch arose and said to his son Methuselah, To thee, my son, will I speak, hear my word. Incline thy ear to the visionary dream of thy father. Before I married thy mother, Edna, I saw a vision on my bed. Behold, a cow sprung forth from the earth, and this cow was white. After a female heifer sprung forth, with it another heifer. One of them was black, and one was red. The black heifer then struck the red one, and pursued it over the earth. From that period I could see nothing more of the red heifer, but the black one increased in bulk, and a female heifer came with it. After this I saw that many cows proceeded forth, resembling him and following after him. The first female young one also went out in the presence of the first cow, and sought the red heifer, but found him not. She lamented with a great lamentation while she was seeking him. Then I looked until the first cow came to her, from which time she became silent and ceased to lament. Afterwards she calved another white cow, and again calved many cows and black heifers. In my sleep also I perceived a white bull, which in like manner grew and became a large white bull. After him many white cows came forth, resembling him, and they began to calve many other white cows, which resembled them and followed each other. Again I looked attentively while sleeping and surveyed heaven above. And behold, a single star fell down, which raised up and ate and fed among those cows. After that I perceived other large and black cows, and behold, all of them changed their stalls and pastures, while their young began to lament one with another. Again I looked in my vision and surveyed heaven, when behold, I saw many stars which descended and projected themselves from heaven to where the first star was, into the midst of those young ones, while the cows were with them, feeding in the midst of them. I looked at and observed them, when behold, they all acted after the manner of horses, and began to approach the young cows, all of whom became pregnant and brought forth elephants, camels, and asses. At these all the cows were alarmed and terrified, when they began biting with their teeth, swallowing, and striking with their horns. They began to devour the cows. Behold, no. They began to devour the cows, and behold, all the children of the earth trembled, shook with terror at them, and suddenly fled away. Again I perceived them when they began to strike and swallow each other, and the earth cried out. Then I raised my eyes a second time towards heaven, and saw in a vision that, behold, there came forth from heaven, as it were the likeness of white men. One came forth from thence, and 3 with him. Those 3 who came forth last seized me by my hand, and raised me up from the generation of the earth, elevated me to a high station. Then they showed me a lofty tower on the earth, while every hill became diminished, and they said, Remain here until thou perceivest what shall come upon those elephants, camels, and asses, upon the stars, and upon all the cows. Then I looked at that one in the 4 white men who came forth first. He seized the first star which fell down from heaven, and binding it hand and foot, he cast it into a valley narrow, deep, stupendous, and gloomy. Then one of them drew his sword and gave it to the elephants, camels, and asses, who began to strike each other, and the whole earth shook on account of them. When I looked in the vision, behold, one of those 4 angels who came forth hurled from heaven, collected together, and took all the great stars, whose form partly resembled that of horses, and binding them all hand and foot, cast them into the cavities of the earth. Then one of those 4 went to the white cows and taught them a mystery. While the cow was trembling, it was born and became a man, and fabricated for himself a large ship. In this he dwelt, and 3 cows dwelt with him in that ship, and covered them. Again, I lifted up my eyes towards heaven, and saw a lofty roof. Okay, so what's going on here? I think a couple things are going on here. The first thing is this is a retelling of the Testament, right? This right here is Noah, right? And Noah's in this book, so Noah has meaning outside of here in the book itself. But this is a retelling. So this is Noah right here, right? this cow or yeah. Yeah, fabricate for himself a large ship. Okay. Trembling, it was born and became a man. So, like, think back when Noah was before Enoch, and he was trembling, right? So when Enoch grabs him, raises him up, and says, "Stop whining like a bitch," it's at that point that he's born and becomes a man. Maybe that's what that's saying. Um. So yeah, no, that's Noah. But there's another thing going on here because this, I think, is prophecy, right? He is prophesying about future events, future stuff that's going to happen in the future. So when you're listening to this stuff, think of stuff past his time. In this he dwelt, and 3 cows dwelt with him in that ship and covered them. Again I lifted up my eyes towards heaven and saw a lofty roof. Above it were 7 cataracts, which poured forth on a certain village much water. Again I looked, and behold, there were fountains open on the earth in that large village. The water began to boil up and rose over the earth, so that the village was not seen, while its whole soil was covered with water. Much water was over it, darkness and clouds. Then I surveyed the height of this water, and it was elevated above the village. It flowed over the village and stood higher than the earth. Then all the cows which were collected there, while I looked on them, were drowned, swallowed up, and destroyed in the water. But the ship floated above it. All the cows, the elephants, the camels, and the asses were drowned on the earth, all the cattle. Nor could I perceive them, neither were they able to get out, but perished and sunk into the deep. Again I looked in the vision until those cataracts from that roof were removed, and the fountains of the earth became equalized, while the other depths were opened, into which the water began to descend until the dry ground appeared. The ship remained on the earth, the darkness receded, and it became light. Then the white cow, which became a man, went out of the ship, and the 3 cows with him. One of the 3 cows was white, resembling that cow. One of them was red as blood, and one of them was black. And the white cow left them. All right, that would be the brotherhood, right? And this is important to note here because there's a black cow. So Enoch loves the black cows. Like there's elephants, there's elephants earlier. And I think Enoch loves elephants, but those just happen to be bad guy elephants. Okay, so there are good guy elephants and bad guy elephants. But it's just, this is important to note because later on, it kind of sounds like he's just maybe a little bit racist. But I don't think he is. Like, this is Martin Luther King stuff, content of character, right? Merit. A black man on the rope is better than a white man on the ground, right? It's all about, the content of your character. Same kind of stuff. And there's no brown cow here because if you're brown, then you have white ancestry and black ancestry. That's just science. And so, if you're in America and you're brown, then, you ought to be apologizing for what your ancestors did to your ancestors. I pause for laughter. No, but my dad is dark red Apache skin color. He's darker than Spike Lee, I think. So my mom is a redhead, so I get more of her skin color. But I'm an interracial like the mulattoes, okay? And brown is such a beautiful color. Like, don't be mad at science. Oh, doo-doo. Then began wild beasts and birds to bring forth. Of all these the different kinds assembled together: lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, wild boars, foxes, rabbits, and the hanser, the ciset, the avest, kites, the fonkas, and ravens. Then a white cow was born in the midst of them. So, like, the children are going to become furries, I guess. I'm joking, that's not my interpretation, but I don't know, like each of these, like the elephants might have meaning in the imagery of an elephant, of a bad guy elephant. I don't know, what do you think? Like an incompetent aristocrat, right? Uh, Something like that. And they began to bite each other, when the white cow which was born in the midst of them brought forth a wild ass, and a white cow at the same time, and after that many wild asses. Then the white cow which was born brought forth a black wild sow and a white sheep. That wild sow brought forth many swine. Okay. um no, and that sheep brought forth 12 sheep. And those 12 sheep grew up, and they delivered one of them to the asses. So this is the story of Joseph right here, right? And I think there's prophecy in here. Um, dum, 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 dum. I think at times white is being used for innocence, right? Uh, not for racism or anything. Um, and again, Enoch loves the black cows. Okay, so let's see here. No, it's just a bunch of black swine running around. That's what he's saying right here. Okay, when those 12 sheep grew up, they delivered one of them to the asses. Again, those asses delivered that sheep to the wolves, and he grew up in the midst of them. Then the Lord brought the 11 other sheep, that they might dwell and feed with him in the midst of the wolves. They multiplied, and there was abundance of pasture for them. But the wolves began to frighten and oppress them, while they destroyed their young ones. They were left, and they left their young in torrents of deep water. Now the sheep began to cry out on account of their young, and fled for refuge to their Lord. One, however, which was saved, escaped and went away to the wild asses. I beheld the sheep moaning and crying and petitioning their Lord. So this is Moses. With all their might, until the Lord of sheep descended at their voice from this lofty habitation, went to them and inspected them. He called out to that sheep which had secretly stolen away from the wolves, and told him to make the wolves understand that they were not to touch the sheep. Then the sheep went to the wolves with the word of the Lord when another met him, and proceeded with him. Both of them together entered the dwelling of the wolves, conversing with them made them understand that from thenceforward they were not to touch the sheep. Afterwards I perceived the wolves greatly prevailing over the sheep with their whole force. The sheep cried out, and their Lord came to them. He began to strike the wolves, who commenced a grievous lamentation, but the sheep were silent, nor from that time did they cry out. Right, it's just business, I think. And then I looked at them until they departed from the wolves. The eyes of the wolves were blind, who went out and followed them with all their might. But the Lord of the sheep proceeded with them and conducted them. All his sheep followed him. His countenance was terrific and splendid, and glorious was his aspect. Yet the wolves began to follow the sheep until they overtook them in a certain lake of water. Then that lake became divided, water standing up on both sides before their face. While their Lord was conducting them, he placed himself between them and the wolves. The wolves, however, perceived not the sheep, but went into the midst of the lake, following them, and running after them into the lake of water. But when they saw the Lord of sheep, they turned to fly from before his face. Then the water of the lake returned, and that suddenly, according to its nature, it became full and was raised up until it covered the wolves. I saw that all of them which had followed the sheep perished and were drowned, and the sheep passed over this water, proceeding into a wilderness which was without both water and grass, and they began to open their eyes and to see. Then I beheld the Lord of the sheep inspecting them and giving them water and grass. The sheep already mentioned was proceeding with them and conducting them. And when he had ascended to the top of a lofty rock, the Lord of sheep sent him to them. Afterwards I perceived their Lord standing before them with an aspect terrific and severe. And when they all beheld him, they were frightened at his countenance. All of them were alarmed and trembled. They cried out after that sheep, and to the other sheep who had been with him, and who was in the midst of them, saying, We are not able to stand before our Lord or to look upon him. Then that sheep who conducted them went away and ascended to the top of the rock. Okay, again, this is just, this is a description of righteousness right here. Right? The wicked are not able to look a just man in the face. But that's what they try to do. And in a time of trouble, the good men put their heads to the ground, like Enoch, or his eyes to the ground. So they were not able to stand before our Lord or to look upon him. I think that's what that means. So, I mean, what's going on here? I mean, again, I think there's prophecy that pops up every now and then. Like real prophecy that pops up. But this would be a part where he's just trying to teach you something. So there are messages within this. And finally, this is just Torah cred. This is his way of, making sure the book gets propagated. Because if you have some Torah cred on it, it's going to more likely be propagated. So I think there's a lot going on here. But right here, this sentence, we are not able to stand before our Lord or to look upon him. That is the righteousness of the good people. Like, they're no longer looking at the ground. They're looking up. And when they start to look up, then the wicked will look down. I think that is what is going on here, maybe. And so this would be him just teaching you things within all of this. So I think this is maybe like a clusterfuck of different things, maybe. Then that sheep who conducted them went away and ascended to the top of the rock. When the rest of the sheep began to grow blind and to wander from the path which he had shown them, but he knew it not. Their Lord, however, was moved with great indignation against them, and when that sheep had learned what had happened, he descended from the top of the rock, and coming to them found that there were many which had become blind, and had wandered from his path. As soon as they beheld him, they feared and trembled at his presence. And became desirous of returning to their fold. Then that sheep, taking with him other sheep, went to those which had wandered, and afterwards began to kill them. They were terrified at his countenance. Then he caused those which had wandered to return, who went back to their fold. I likewise saw in the vision that his sheep became a man, built a house for the Lord of the sheep, and made them all stand in that house. I perceived also that the sheep which proceeded to meet this sheep, their conductor, died. I saw too that all the great sheep perished, while the smaller ones rose up in their place, entered into a pasture, and approached a river of water. Then that sheep, their conductor, who became a man, who separated from them and died, all the sheep sought after him and cried for him with bitter lamentation. I saw All right. I saw something. Okay, so. And I saw all of them which had followed the sheep perished and were drowned. But the sheep passed over this water, proceeding to a wilderness, which was without both water and grass. And they began to open their eyes and to see. Then I beheld the Lord of the sheep inspecting them, and giving them water and grass. The sheep already mentioned was proceeding with them and conducting them. When he had when he had ascended to the top of a lofty rock, the Lord of the sheep sent him to them. Afterwards I perceived their Lord standing before them with an aspect terrific and severe. And when they all beheld him, they were frightened at his countenance. All of them were alarmed and trembled. They cried out after that sheep, and to the other sheep who had been with him, and who was in the midst of them, saying, We are not able to stand before our Lord, or to look upon him. Then that sheep who conducted them went away and ascended the top of the rock. When the rest of the sheep began to grow blind and to wander from the path which he had shown them, but he knew it not. Their Lord, however, was moved with great indignation against them. And when that sheep had learned what had happened, he descended from the top of the rock, and coming to them found that there were many, which had become blind, and had wandered from his path. As soon as they beheld him, they feared and trembled at his presence, and became desirous of returning to their fold. Then that sheep, taking with him another sheep, went to those which had wandered, and afterwards began to kill them. They were terrified at his countenance. Then he caused those which had wandered to return, who went back to their fold. I likewise saw there in the vision that this sheep became a man, built a house. Didn't I already read this shit? Bitter lamentation. Let's see here. I did. I saw likewise that they ceased to cry after that sheep and passed, and that there other sheep arose, all of whom conducted them instead of those who were dead and who had previously conducted them. Then I saw that the sheep entered into a goodly place in a territory delectable and glorious. I also saw that they became satiated, and that their house was in the midst of a delectable territory, and that sometimes their eyes were opened, and that sometimes they were blind, until another sheep arose and conducted them. He brought them all back, and their eyes were opened. Then dogs, foxes, and wild boars began to devour them, until again another sheep arose, and the master of the flock, one of themselves, a ram, to conduct them. This ram began to butt on every side these dogs, foxes, and wild boars, until they all perished. But the former sheep opened his eyes, and saw the ram in the midst of them, who had laid aside his glory. He began to strike the sheep, treading upon them, and behaving himself without dignity. Then their Lord sent the former sheep again to still different sheep, and raised him up to be a ram, and to conduct them instead of that sheep who had laid aside his glory. Going therefore to him and conversing with him alone, he raised up that ram and made him a prince and leader of the flock, all the time that the dogs troubled the sheep. The first ram paid respect to this latter ram. Then the latter ram arose and fled away from before his face, and I saw that those dogs caused the first ram to fall. But the latter ram arose and conducted the smaller sheep. That ram likewise began many sheep and died. Then there was a smaller sheep, a ram instead of him, which became a prince and leader, conducting the flock. And the sheep increased in size and multiplied, and all the dogs, foxes, and wild boars feared and fled away from him. That ram also struck and killed all the wild beasts, so that they could not again prevail in the midst of the sheep, nor at any time ever snatch them away. And that house was made large and wide, a lofty tower being built upon it by the sheep for the Lord of the sheep. The house was low, but the tower was elevated and very high. Then the Lord of the sheep stood upon that tower, and caused a full table to approach before him. Again I saw that those sheep wandered and went various ways, forsaking that their house, and that their Lord called to some among them, whom he sent to them. But these the sheep began to kill, and when one of them was saved from slaughter, he leaped up and cried out against those who were desirous of killing him. But the Lord of the sheep delivered him from their hands, and made him ascend to him, and remain with him. He sent also many others to them to testify, and with lamentations to exclaim against them. Again I saw when some of them forsook the house of their Lord and his tower, wandering on all sides and growing blind. I saw that the Lord of sheep made a great slaughter among them in their pasture, until they cried out to him in consequence of that slaughter. Then he departed from the place of his habitation, and left them in the power of lions, tigers, wolves, the zeeped, and in the power of foxes and of every beast. And the wild beasts began to tear them. See, the wild beasts are getting in onto the action too, right? And why would that be? Like we'll see later on. It's because Enoch's going to give them the authority to ascend the wealth of the wicked, right? This is like rabble rousing stuff. So the beasts are going to be on the side of the righteous, I think, is what he's saying. I saw too that he forsook the house of their fathers and their tower, giving them all into the power of lions to tear and devour them, into the power of every beast. Then I began to cry out with all my might, imploring the Lord of the sheep and showing him how the sheep were devoured by all the beasts of prey. But he looked on in silence, rejoicing that they were devoured, swallowed up and carried off, and leaving them in the power of every beast for food. He called also 70 shepherds and resigned to them the care of the sheep, that they might look over them, saying to them and their associates, every one of you henceforward overlook the sheep, and whatsoever I command you, and I will deliver them to you numbered. To you numbered. Again, this isn't the way right here, right? You shouldn't be a sheep, according to Enoch. Everybody should think for themselves. Everybody should be free. But if you're not free, if you don't want to think for yourself, then you're a sheep. And in Moses' eyes, and I think Enoch's too, you don't have to treat the sheep with respect because they don't treat themselves with respect. So, and I will deliver them to you numbered. But they're all still individuals, right? No, I will tell you which of them shall be slain, these destroyed, and he delivered the sheep to them. Then he called to another and said, understand and watch everything which the shepherds shall do to these sheep, for many of them shall perish than I have for many more of them shall perish than I have commanded. All right, so they're like just going crazy here. So I guess these sheep are bad sheep, right? Overlook the sheep. Numbered. Yeah, I mean you could number wicked sheep too, because they don't deserve respect either. Let's see. And then he called to another and said, understand and watch everything which the shepherds shall do to these sheep, for many more of them shall perish than I have commanded. Right, so they're just like, woo, 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 woo. No, every excess and slaughter which the shepherds shall commit, there shall be an account. So like, don't let them do it. This is like Enoch has a warm heart, peoples. Okay, that's not good. Okay, that's not good. Enoch has a warm heart. Enoch wants all good men to survive. Okay. As how many may have perished by my command, and how many. See, so I've washed my hands of this. So, like Enoch's telling you, hey, let's be rational and all that. I think. How many may have perished by my command? Maybe not. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm still searching. And how many they may have destroyed of their own heads. Alright, I think that'll do it for today. Or not today, but right now.